Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, what weight loss drugs could mean for moms and breastfeeding babies. We discuss the latest medical headlines and take your calls and questions in our monthly house call with Dr. Joe Sirven. Later in the program, hitching a dark ride with Jacksonville-based animatronics giant Sally Industries. But first, I'm joined as I am each month by Dr. Joe Sirven, the host of Saturday's WJCT program and podcast, What's Health Got to Do with It? He helps break down the latest medical headlines. He takes your calls and questions on any healthcare topic. Welcome, Dr. Joe.
Oh, Ann, it's such a joy to be here.
Happy December.
Happy December holiday time.
Yeah. Did you have a nice Thanksgiving?
I did. How about yourself?
Wonderful. Yeah. Great time.
Just wanted it to last longer.
I know. But here we are back on a Monday. And of course, we hope you had a great holiday too. If you have calls, questions on any healthcare topic, you can reach out on air at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect at wjct.org or go to firstcoastconnect.org and find all the ways that you can connect with us. Dr. Joe, I want to start with some news that could really impact nursing students, both financially and maybe reputationally. This is whether or not nursing qualifies as a, quote, professional degree. Tell us what the Department of Education has been doing here.
Well, the Department of Education basically, for the purposes of student loans and the dollar amount that you can get for student loans for a degree, classifies certain things as professional and some things as not. And I'll just say it this way, stunningly, nursing, as well as physician assistants, physical therapists, audiologists, to pick some healthcare related ones, did not make the cut. There are some things that you try to find a way to say, how do you defend or how do you look at this? I have no words. I'll just say it this way. You cannot run hospitals, clinics, an OR, ICU, ER, the entire healthcare system without nurses. You just can't. And to assume that they're not professional, even if it was for the purposes of a student loan, it boggles my mind.
Well, it's interesting because some of the things that were included, include things like chiropractic medicine and theology, veterinary medicine, but not nursing. And so, I think for a lot of nurses, it surely could impact them financially if they're in school and they're pursuing a degree and this would apply to certain caps that are available for, recouping some of those costs. But I feel like nursing is often, doesn't get enough respect sort of as it is. Is this something that nurses are concerned will just, diminish their professional reputation or are just taking as kind of an insult?
It's they're taking it as an insult, and they should take it as an insult. This is one of those that needs to get walked back. We have such a we talk about doctor shortages. The nursing shortages, which we haven't talked about a lot, is just as huge.
Yeah.
There is such a demand in all facets of that area. When I was looking at social media on this one, and I saw chief nursing officers left and right talking about this issue, this is that, you have to say something. This is just kind of crossing a line. A lot of people need, as we all talk about the cost of higher education, nursing schools are in that mix. You need loans to help people complete this degree. This degree is needed. From what I can tell, they do very nice living. They could certainly be paid better, but for what they do, this is it's just one of those that I'm just finding myself completely verklempt. I don't have a way of like what was the mindset to reclassify this. This is just one of those areas that I think that just needs to kind of get changed.
Yeah.
Because it's just shooting us in the foot.
Florida in particular has really been working to try to stem this gap that exists in terms of what's needed in the world of nursing. And, there's a lot of schools, including our local schools, that have
Right.
created fast track degrees. They're trying to get more nursing students in. They're expanding their programming. All of that costs money. And nursing, like a lot of things in medicine, isn't getting any less complicated. It isn't
Nope.
getting easier to do. I mean, there's all the time more services that are provided, more complexity to the way that those services are provided. So it is, a difficult thing to master.
I mean, let's look at it this way. If you look at the healthcare system and where we're going, let's take a condition like cancer, for that matter. That type of care is delivered across a team. Yes, there's a doctor on the team, but there is everywhere, left and right, nursing on that team. Let's take
And often have the most patient contact, right?
absolutely. I think about like in an intensive care unit. You define an intensive care unit by the ratio of nurse to patient. So that intensive care is based on the nursing care that is delivered to that patient. That is how you do this. That's why I'm like, this is one of those things that I hope gets adjusted and quickly gets fixed, because this is not going to help any of us. We're talking about bringing down costs. This is how now you are going to kind of create a situation where you don't get care. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I think it's definitely something that we'll be watching, because this list of degrees that are not classified as professional, I mean, as you said, audiologists, but also architects, accountants, educators, physical therapists, physician assistants, social workers.
It's like I listen to that and I go, these are people that you need on your team. These are elements that you have to have in place for a lot of different healthcare areas.
Yeah. If you'd like to reach us or have a question for Dr. Joe Sirven on any healthcare topic, you can call us at 904-549-2937. You can email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. And if you would like to remain anonymous with a healthcare question, you certainly can. But Dr. Joe joins us once a month, and now is your time. If you'd like to reach us, we've got a call from Sally in Springfield. Good morning, Sally. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. Thanks for bringing attention to this. My point is, with no offense to anyone, we shouldn't even be puzzled, because the person who is in charge of the Department of Education right now has a background in professional wrestling. And that's just basically my comment.
Yeah, is true. Linda McMahon's background is
Right.
not
That's true.
in education. We
Good
have a
point.
comment also from Jane on Facebook saying Big Ed, as we call the Federal Department of Education, is a tragic, chaotic mess. I apologize to every professional nurse who is injured by this madness.
So true. I'm gonna kind of come clean here. My wife is a nurse. My mother-in-law is a nurse. I am very much. I've learned many pieces of my medical profession from nursing, and when I've had to be in a hospital or seek care, those are who I remember.
Sure.
Sometimes more than the physician itself.
Sure. I think anybody who's had a loved one in the hospital knows that that's also the person that family members most rely on, whether it's to get you a drink, if they can help you out, or just, offer some consolation, help to interpret what a doctor is saying. I mean, there's so many services that they provide on just an individual level. Is there anything that you would suggest that people do or could do?
Yeah, this is the time to not be quiet. This is one of those moments that you do have to reach out and either to wherever the Department of Education is or to your local congressperson, just to let them know that you support this and that this needs to change.
Yeah, we've got a call from Peter on the South Side. Good morning, Peter. Go ahead.
Yes, good morning. I might be a little confused. If so, please help me. But a degree is not a professional certification. Nursing is a profession, and you get an RN, but that is not the same as a Bachelor of Science degree that may be a stepping stone. So I'm not quite sure what the implication of this decision is. A nursing certification, a professional certification, is still a registered nurse granted by the appropriate agency in the state of Florida, right?
That is correct. There is nuance when it comes to how you look at the professional degree. There is a BSN, which is the 4-year degree
That's a
for nursing. That's a
Bachelor of Science in
bachelor's.
Nursing.
Exactly. There is, if you want to go further, you can go into nursing practitioner, which also you have to have the BSN to go further to complete that particular level degree. Yes, to serve as from a regulatory standpoint, there is an RN or LPN. Those are determined by the state, in this case, state nursing board in that regard. Nonetheless, though, in order to get that particular registration, you have to have some type of education that gets you there. That education falls back into the issue that we were talking about, which is how things are demarcated in terms of loan programs to be able to get whatever work you need to do to obtain that RN, LPN, those type of things.
Yeah, and that's the funding that's possibly going to be restricted. We've got a call from Rachel in Mandarin. Good morning, Rachel. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the call. I'm a speech language pathologist and I own a private practice, Brainworks Therapy in Mandarin. And I just want to also call attention that this same lack of professional degree status is affecting speech language pathologists as well. We are the professionals who are working on all aspects of communication and swallowing disorders from birth till end of life, both in the medical system and in the school system, whether it be neonatal, early intervention, disorders with affecting academic progress, whether it's those with neurodegenerative disorders or aphasia or dementia. There's just so many needs within our healthcare and education system that it is completely disheartening what this government is doing to the entire system from top to bottom.
Rachel, thanks so much for your calls and comments. We also have a call from Michelle in Avondale. Go ahead, Michelle.
Hey, good morning to you both. As a nurse for 43 years, it was really disheartening to read the news. I couldn't believe it when I did read it. But my question to you both is, I know a lot of the focus is on funding, but it could be a bargaining chip for businesses, because if we've been deemed unprofessional now, how do we negotiate a viable wage when we're not a profession anymore? Not just for nursing, but just like the speech therapist that just spoke. How do we negotiate? No, these are primarily female roles that have been, for years and years, you were either a teacher or a nurse, or that was your profession. But now, all of that is out the window. What are your thoughts on this?
That's a good question, Michelle. Dr. Joe.
I think that's a fantastic point, Michelle. I mean, I know that in some places, I'm thinking, because I've worked in a few states, nurses are unionized in some locations, and certainly that can play against this. This is another fantastic point you're making in terms of making people know that this is not a minor issue. To the speech language pathologist, that's another group you cannot live with. If someone's had, in my area, stroke, they have to get looked for swallow studies and all the other conditions that were mentioned. This is just something that just cannot stand.
We've got an email from Kelly that sort of moves us into our next topic. She says, please also consider that almost all women who give birth in hospitals are guided through their labor and delivery by nurses. The nurses helped me for my entire delivery. The doctor came in at the very end to deliver the baby. Very true for, I think, a lot of us, and that very often is the kind of care that you get. You do see your doctor very often on rounds, maybe in the late afternoon, and you get kind of an update. But all day, every day, the people that are giving you that hands-on care are nurses. And I do want to talk about pregnancy, because there's a lot of pregnancy medical news lately. So let's start, if we can, with this new questions being raised about the use of weight loss drugs, either before or after pregnancy. We're seeing particularly an increase in women who are beginning to take these medications after they give birth. And a lot of questions people have about whether that is good for the mom, whether that's good for the baby.
Here's the thing, Ann. We also have a lot of questions about the use of these medications. And we're talking about the weight loss drugs like Wegovy, Ozempic, all the other brand names. There is a huge uptick in the use of these weight loss medications postpartum. Now, what we don't know, and here's the thing, is like, what does that do to a woman who is postpartum? There's a lot of hormonal changes. There's a lot of metabolic changes. You're breastfeeding. There are a lot of questions, and the amount of studies that look at this, they're very few to where I would say I don't even know if there are clear guidelines on this issue, but this has become a hot area of usage for these medications.
And so we know that in terms of before pregnancy, there has been an increase also in use of these drugs, and that can be of great benefit to women if they're struggling with obesity or overweight, and they are trying to get in a safer place to deliver because it can be um, less risky for people if they are, if they weigh less, if they're maybe not facing problems that can come with obesity like preeclampsia. And so a lot of doctors are inclined to give these drugs perhaps in leading up to that period. But they can also, when people stop taking them, they can also lead to very rapid weight gain.
That's right. I mean, this is where we get into a lot of nuances. This is not going to be this simple, take this will happen, and all will be great. And, like all those TV ads, the rainbows and all that type of stuff. On one level, before you become pregnant, and if you're overweight, this can be very helpful. What I've heard anecdotally, it actually helps in fertility because women who have who may have been overweight or obese, and they take and lose weight, and suddenly they can become pregnant. So there's the positive news. Where it gets complicated is that during pregnancy, I hope that you're not taking it because that's a natural time to be gaining weight for you and the
Sure.
baby. After you deliver, that's where it becomes a question. You are set up, the woman is typically set up for breastfeeding. Prolactin, which is one of the hormone that is released in order for you to produce milk, it helps to do two things. Number one, on one element, it helps to kind of burn off calories, but also it can increase your appetite because making milk actually increases your metabolism and
It requires an enormous amount of energy.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so in that regard, you may find that the appetite kind of increases. But there is also some element that in some women, it can kind of lower, it can help to lessen some of the weight afterwards. What we don't know is exactly how does this drug interact with this hormone specifically. Number two, what about it in breast milk? It's theoretically it shouldn't cross over, but we don't know. This is the type of questions
Right.
that need to be studied. And I will tell you that when I looked up the studies to kind of see what do we know, the American study for on the semi-glutide, which is the main ingredient for Wegovy or Ozempic, was 8 women that were
Oh,
observed.
yeah.
That's
No,
we're talking millions of people now
that's
taking it,
not a
and
sample size you can rely on.
exactly, that is where we are in terms of the research in this area.
I mean, the concern obviously is you don't want to be diminishing appetite in a child if there's any chance that that could
Exactly,
happen. But also, the
exactly.
way these drugs work, they can impact, proteins in the body. And a woman needs to sort of have all of her strength to produce breast milk. I mean, it is not a small task to do that.
And this is why I've noticed that like the only guidelines I could find is like one in the Canadian group, which are saying we should not be using these drugs at that point. But the data, the numbers, we don't have those studies.
Yeah, and it's going to be a while. Well, we'll have to keep an eye on that. Another thing that I wanted to ask you about is some research that's been done into trying to bring down the rate of C-sections.
Yeah.
So there was a really interesting story just this past week in the New York Times tracking a hospital that had a very high rate of C-sections, 40%, much higher than is recommended. This was Rochester General Hospital in New York. And I mean, a lot of interesting things about how they approached trying to bring that number down. a lot of people thought it's not a number you can bring down. This has to do with the older age of women as they're having the health of women. Things like obesity can contribute to a rise in C-sections. So a lot of people were saying this is just a trend that's irreversible. It's happening and it's just going to continue to happen. But this hospital found that they could actually create some strategies and bring that number way down.
Yeah, this is an interesting element because there was nothing like so new tech or very dramatic about how they did it. For whatever reason, C-section rates in the United States are stubbornly stuck around 32 to 33% of all pregnancies. It should be running, at least per global guidelines, everything, more towards 15, 19%, maybe in 20 is where we should be running. So the U.S. average is just stuck. There's a couple of things. Maybe if people feel that they want to go to C-section anytime there's a sign of trouble. And that's where we get into like if there are complications relating to the women who are delivering. The darker side of that is C-sections make money. It is an operation, it's a procedure, and there is way more reimbursement for C-sections than there are for a traditional delivery. So we have to put that out on the table too. Somewhere in the middle is the truth. Here's what this hospital did. They just had the uncomfortable conversation with the provider, the OBGYN, the person doing it, to point out, here's your C-section rate. What are we going to do about
compared to all of the others?
To the others, and can we improve this? And it seemed by doing that little simple thing, it's uncomfortable to kind of approaching a person and telling them, what's going on here? Why is this rate so high? They were able to lower that rate. And that is not too complicated. It wasn't very high tech. It was conversations and kind of like that, taking off the transparency so that everyone saw that element. Now, I'm sure that if you're a high risk OB doctor, maybe you're going to have a high C-section rate for obvious reasons, but maybe that isn't the case for every situation.
There are so many things that I thought were interesting about the way that they approached this. And I know that one of the things that they did was to say, we're just going to charge the same.
Right.
If you have a delivery without medical assistance versus a C-section, we're going to charge the same. And so there was no financial incentive. And that removed, some of the pressures that doctors admitted that they feel. Sometimes, if they've been with someone who's been laboring all day and they know if they leave and somebody else sort of gets the sale, if you will, right? The next doctor that comes in. So some of them felt pressure to do a C-section before they would leave for their shift, which shocked me. I just really had never thought about it in those terms. But also trying some more simple interventions, as you said, just sort of acknowledging the rate difference. And then this hospital in particular also would put a little note on the door of a first-time mom, noting that they might need some extra time, that this is going to be a longer labor, presumably because it is a first child, and also prepping moms for, this also blew my mind, suggesting that they prepare for a 3-day labor, which nobody wants to prepare for. But they said that sometimes women come in with an unrealistic expectation. And so if it is going on past, 12 hours or 15 hours, they might just say, okay, it's time for a C-section, not realizing that that is normal. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's a problem or that they're in trouble. And if they're mentally prepared for that, they might be less inclined to say, let's move to a C-section.
And this opens up a door to another area that could help. And it almost ties in back to our professional thing, to the concept of having advocates with you, whether that is a doula, which is someone who's actually a non-medical professional, yet they are there through the birthing process to serve as both kind of coach, advocate,
translator,
and translator for the person while they are in active labor, and maybe they're focused on something else, so that you have someone there in your room, or the use of birth coaching discussions to kind of put this kind of on the table. And these are very useful items that could change that rate.
I do want to just note too, because there's been some recent investigation into the use of fetal monitors, which
Yeah.
is something that is routinely done, strapped to pretty much every woman who's brought in and delivering it in a setting where there's any time to, do that prep work. And they are the top justification for C-sections in healthy pregnancies. And very often the monitors are suggesting distress. Everybody gets worried, and understandably so, but apparently they don't necessarily indicate a need for this medical intervention, this surgical intervention.
So this is one of those areas where really this has to be looked at from a healthcare system standpoint, and how, like, notice how we have picked up on so many variables
Yeah.
that can do everything from a physician shift to the payment to the technology. This almost has to be almost rethought
Yeah.
in some ways, because each one of these are contributing to the issue. Again, it's a national issue when you look at just we've been stuck. But my goodness, that hospital, God bless them for figuring out that there are not that difficult or expensive ways that you can kind of get to that
Yeah, and
answer.
we should say, if we haven't, they dropped the rate from 40 to 25%, so an extraordinary decline. Um, I want to briefly touch on some new research that indicates a similar but different kind of dementia that's called late. Uh, Initially, a lot of people thought it was Alzheimer's, but now there's some research showing that it's separate and distinct. What do we know?
So late is a it's more of a recently described type of neurodegenerative condition, a dementia. It is an acronym, and it stands for limbic predominant age related TDP 43 encephalopathy.
Good job.
I had to write it down because I was like, on live radio, I'm like, I'm going to mess that up. So that is, let's just say late. What's interesting about that, this is a TDP-43 is a protein that seems to get deposited in the limbic system, is where you create short-term memory and emotional regulation. It's something called the hippocampus. It's in our brain, and there is this accumulation and atrophy in that. This type of dementia has two interesting things. Number one, it seems to occur in the older individuals, late 70s, 80s, 90s. In fact, it's very common in that group.
As many as a third.
It's huge in that group. The second thing about that is that it is slower than typical Alzheimer's disease, but it seems to be relegated just to short-term memory.
Mm.
While Alzheimer's, you think about, there's other conditions, language, or visual spatial things where you get lost, or you're not planning through tasks. This really is stuck to short-term memory. And the protein is not the amyloid that we've been talking about on our show or this show, where they have those new drugs. It's this TDP-43, which is different. And curiously, the same protein that accumulates in frontotemporal dementia, that's the one that Bruce Willis has, or in ALS, which
Yeah.
is in a very different condition. The difference between late frontotemporal dementia and ALS is where it accumulates, that it's specific to this area. And that's a new thing.
And this is something that, because it's similar to Alzheimer's, has been tested perhaps without people realizing that this was a separate thing. And so the effectiveness of drugs that have been given for Alzheimer's may have been impacted by the fact that those drugs don't work on this kind of illness.
Exactly. And that brings up the whole issue that we're going to find that there's a grab bag of a lot of different options.
Yeah, and so it's something obviously that we're going to continue to watch and see some additional testing on. Dr. Joe Sirven, it's great to have you on the program. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for all your wisdom, and we'll look to see you again next month.
I can't wait. It'll be New Year's. Looking forward to it.
All right. Up next, from Chuck E. Cheese animatronics to augmented reality, we discuss the evolution of the amusement park dark ride. Welcome back. Well, Disney's It's a Small World is one of the oldest and best known, but the world of dark rides is actually quite large. And Jacksonville based Sally Dark Rides is an industry leader. I had an opportunity to sit down with Lauren Wood Weaver. She's the company's vice president of marketing and business development to talk about working in the company that her father created and the ill fated ride based on an iconic Moody Blues song. Lauren Wood Weaver, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
So Sally Dark Rides got started in the 70s, I understand, late 70s. Tell us a little bit about the gentleman that started it and kind of how he got rolling in this industry.
Sure. Well, we were started in 1977 by three Johns, all local to the Jacksonville area. And they were all interested in animatronic production. John Rob Holland, who later became a dentist here in the area, had to give a presentation in his dental class, and he decided to make it extremely interesting by basically taking a mannequin's head and making the eyes blink and the mouth open wide and speak to the class. And it was really, really cool. Um, and then he got an A, and that was kind of it until his buddies, John Fox and John Wood, my father actually, came over and, thought this animatronic talking head was really the next big thing. That was when Star Wars first came out. So
Sure.
robotics was in, to say
Yeah.
the least. And John Wood is the only one that really remains with the company today, but
He's still with them.
he is. He got
Wow.
starstruck by that first Sally talking head and took it to market.
And so that's where the name comes from, is this original animatronic doll mannequin.
Yes,
Yeah.
it really does.
And so this was a time when animatronics existed. They were pretty rudimentary at this period. Sometimes you would see a single character like in a store window or something. And then there was Disney, which had It's a Small World, which was kind of the definitive uh,
Abs-
animatronics
Absolutely. They
ride.
set the bar and they set it high. And originally, we were really in retail. We were helping companies sell their product in a very interesting way. So, selling ladies' jeans or Buster Brown shoes or Borden Food milk by way of an
Cow.
interesting Elsie the cow. But then we got started with IAPA a year later, which is the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions.
Oh.
And they understood the power of an animatronic thanks to Mr. Disney. So there we were. We got started in the entertainment industry in about 1978, and we took our animatronic characters far and wide. But
Oh,
yeah, a few years later, we decided to kind of change our mode and our business and become a dark ride provider.
so specifically focusing on kind of that entertainment experience. I mean, a lot of people had early experiences with like the Chuck E. Cheese animatronics. Was that sort of what your dad was involved in?
Yeah, not Chuck E. Cheese specifically, but a lot of other
Okay.
pizza style restaurants. We did every animated band you could dream of, including, bears, slew of animals, Ursula and the Oompa for a German restaurant, you name it.
You grew up around this.
Yes, I loved every minute. Obviously, can't shake it.
Wow, that's so extraordinary. And so, do you have a favorite memory of experiencing a dark ride, or just even like an early animatronic that the company was involved with?
Yes, we did some work with Universal back when the studios was first being developed. And while we weren't a turnkey dark ride company then, we really were just an animatronics company. They hired us to do a number of figures, including a couple of my father. So he's
Wow.
actually in the ride twice. So that
Which ride?
the ET adventure ride, and it still stands. It's an incredible attraction. We cannot take credit for it in its entirety, but seeing those plants from ET's world be built in our shop and then riding alongside my father months later, that was pretty groundbreaking for
Wow,
me.
that's a great memory. So the rides themselves have changed, and the experiences have changed. The company has changed insofar as, when you first began, you were either doing animatronics or kind of refurbishing some things, but you do now create from soup to nuts, right? You come up with concepts, you carry it all the way through execution. How long does that process take? Where do the ideas come from?
Oh, goodness. Well, we have an incredible design team that are constantly dreaming day in and day out. And then we also have theme parks come to us and say, hey, we've got this story we want to tell, or we have this intellectual property that we want to create a concept around. So we've been lucky enough to work with, nearby Legoland, Florida. We did 4 different rides for them across the globe called Lost Kingdom Adventure. We've worked with Six Flags amusement parks doing 7 Justice League Battle for Metropolis rides around the world. Recently, we worked with Portaventura to do a Sesame Street ride. And lately, we have been turning out SpongeBob Crazy Carnival rides everywhere from Las Vegas to Turkey. So, yeah.
Wow. So a huge footprint now. And the rides themselves have changed in terms of, the characters, but there's also this huge video element in many of them. You're starting to incorporate things like trackless vehicles, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, all of these, different types of, entertainment and elements. It must raise the level of complexity a great deal.
Yeah, and when you're going to IAPA Expo, once a year or sometimes 3 times a year around the world, you're constantly seeing new technologies, new developments, and we're always wide-eyed to see what works and what will work for years to come. While we are very advanced in technology and we always pay attention to the latest trends. Some of the best gags are tried and true that have been around for 100 years. So we take all of those cards and have them in our back pocket. And when they make sense to use certain special effects or certain large encompassing media components, then we do that. But sometimes they can be simplistic rides and sometimes they can be elaborate and over the top.
Can you describe for us something that might be sort of a recognizable moment in one of these rides? And also maybe one that was tried and didn't work?
Ooh, well, years ago, there was this theme park called Hard Rock Park in Myrtle Beach. That was the only really theme park that I can remember that didn't make it. It was a theme park all based on music. It was really an incredible, incredible experience. And an incredible park. It was just kind of an unfortunate time of the world and the economy
Mm.
in 2008. Our ride is revered as one of the most uh, different, let's say. It was called Nights in White Satin, The Trip. Not exactly a family experience, but, it lasted the years that the park was around. And, we've taken note of everything that's worked and everything that hasn't. And luckily, we've been fortunate that a lot of our rides still stand other than that one.
That's fun. And so now you've developed rides that really are in almost not in miniature, that can be adapted to a lot of facilities that maybe wouldn't have been able to accommodate or afford a full scale dark ride. So how is that changing?
Yeah. So, for years, decades really, we've been talking to family entertainment centers or location based entertainment that have dreamed about dark rides, have desired dark rides, and we've typically had to turn them down.
And what kind of places are you thinking of there?
So, something like a Las Vegas casino or like a strip mall or an old theater space, or, really you're seeing tourist destinations kind of become entertainment hubs now, but they might not all have that theme park space.
Okay.
So while we had to turn them down for a long time, we finally have figured out the solution with the mini dark ride, which is only using 2 to 3,000 square foot of space, so can go into really compact locations, but still have all the bells and whistles of a traditional dark ride.
What did it take to change and be able to use that smaller space? Like, what was the obstacle and what is it that you've learned the secret to?
Well, one of our designers, Rich Hill, is always on his toes, and he really wanted to find a solution to this small footprint problem we were having, and was inspired by the magician cup and ball trick, where you actually move through locations a couple times, but you don't quite realize you're doing that. So we have incorporated 2 rooms with large wraparound screens where we can put different media on it every time you go into that scene. And we have areas that you will pass through with scenic environments, but we use turntables to change those scenic environments. So If we're talking about a SpongeBob ride, let's say, we might have Mr. Krabs on that turntable when you pass by the first time, but when you come back by, it's plankton.
Okay.
So we've just gotten clever on the use of space and the use of a trackless ride vehicle.
It sounds like a great, fun sort of place to work. What kind of skill set do you need? Obviously, you sort of came to it through your family, but what kind of job requirements? What do people come to the job with that you are looking for?
Well, we have so many departments at Sally. It really is a nest of creativity, but everyone has kind of their own lane. We have got an incredible design team that have come from design schools all around the world. We also have a sculpt and mold department, a shop department with, welders and woodworkers, and then we have our art finish department, which is, basically makeup and costuming and using materials to create art on top of our moving hard metal and machinery. And then, of course, marketing and sales and finance and all of that stuff and technical services as well. So there's a lot of different lanes that you can go down and then, may end up at Sally.
And so, I mean, we should say for people who don't know, Sally is based here in Jacksonville. It's where it was founded. It's on Forsyth Street, downtown. What kind of economic footprint has it had?
It's, we every year we're doing projects that range from $3 million to $30 million. So we've been able to, survive in a space that is very unique and hopefully make a huge footprint in the world as well as our reputation and brand is concerned.
And then just, recently there's been some expansion. I mean, here in the States, you're at Six Flags, you're at Kings Dominion in Virginia. You mentioned Universal, but you are doing a lot more global work now.
Yes, global and here in the States. We're actually doing a great project right now for Kings Island up in Cincinnati, Ohio, bringing back a classic dark ride that hasn't been around for 30 years called Phantom Theater. It's an encore experience, completely different than the first, but with the same cast of characters that their fan base know and love. We're bringing an interactive component to the ride, so that should be really fun for their group. But yes, we're over also in South Korea right now, installing one of our largest projects to date. And we also have a mini dark ride, our first, going into Doha Quest in Qatar.
Wow. A huge, great expansion of something that started with a dentist giving a lecture. Well, it's fun to talk to you, Lauren Wood Weaver. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll be back in just a minute.
This December, step into a story where grief, family, and the magic of theater meet. Ghostlight follows Dan, a quiet construction worker who stumbles into a local production of Romeo and Juliet and finds a way back to himself. Join us on Wednesday, December 3rd. Doors at 6:30, film at 7. Popcorn and refreshments are available. Get your tickets now at wjct.org/film.
The lines are the easy part. The hard part is the emotional journey.
On the next Fresh Air, Oscar-winning costume designer Paul Caswell. He watched The Wizard of Oz as a child, designed The Wiz in high school, and now he's brought Wicked to life. He talks about creating more than 1,000 looks to tell the story of Wicked for good. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
Artificial intelligence can already flag early cancer, guide treatment decisions, and rapidly analyze medical data. But many new doctors say they were never trained to use it. Now, more medical schools are integrating AI education into their curricula. Stanford is making AI training mandatory. I'm Meghna Chakrabarty. What does the next generation of doctors need to know about how to use AI? That's on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Hundreds of thousands of federal workers have lost their jobs in the last year. Now, many of those former civil servants are looking for a new way to serve by running for public office. We talked to fired USAID and State Department employees who are looking to represent their communities and ask them what they hope to accomplish. Next time on 1A.
Today starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Well, the Titans scored first for an early 3-0 lead against the Jags and then didn't score again. Here to tell us what the team's dominant performance yesterday means for his playoff hopes is Alessandra Pombriand, sportscaster at our news partner News for Jax. Hi, Alessandra. Happy Monday.
I know. Third Monday in a row, we can say good morning.
Victory Monday.
I know. How awesome is this? We haven't had a 3-game winning streak in a long time.
It is a trend. I think we're allowed to call it a trend at this point.
That's
Choose
good.
a pattern, right? So, first of all, just big game takeaways.
Yeah.
Tell us.
Well, first, I think the biggest takeaway is that the Jaguars now are atop the AFC South title. So if you looked at the playoff bracket, they're one of the top 4 spots, which is amazing. Obviously, they have the tiebreaker of the Colts. The Colts also lost yesterday to the Texans, so that actually is good for the Jaguars. But now the Colts come to Jacksonville this Sunday, and it's probably going to be the biggest game of this season. Thus far, it's the biggest game of the season, but probably when we look at it come week 18, it'll be the biggest game of the season.
Now, these teams now are both 8-4, right?
Yeah, so they're both 8-4 atop the AFC South. But only one gets the automatic bid. Obviously, if you win the divisional title, you get that automatic bid to the playoffs. And right now, the Jaguars are in that spot. There's still a few more games left of the season that could, of course, decide it. You have another game with the Titans when they're here in Jacksonville later at the end of the season. And then you have the Colts. You have to travel to the Colts later in the season as well. And you also go to the Denver Broncos, who are really, really good. So there's a few games in there that will decide the playoff field. But right now, the Jaguars look absolutely great. And the Titans are now eliminated from the playoffs with this loss for them. So, there was a lot to come away with this victory. But, Liam Cohen said, quote, "We need everybody. We need the city to show up and support us. We want to make them proud." And, he said this earlier in this season. I think it was the Chiefs game where they were raving and telling everyone to come. And, of course, that was like a legendary game. So hopefully a lot of Jaguars fans can come out to Everbank Stadium on Sunday.
And they've got the next 2 games at home, right? They've got Colts at the Jags and then Jets at the Jags.
Yeah.
So the next couple weeks, they're going to be wanting locals to show up. How are the performances of the key players playing out? Are you seeing some improvement in, the Trevor's performances? Are you seeing any changes overall in the way that the team is just kind of holding it together?
Yeah, with that, there's been so many injuries that they've had to deal with. Looking just at the defensive line, you didn't have Trayvon Walker because he was out with a knee injury for a second consecutive game. You didn't have Eric Armstead. He showed up on the injury report late Saturday and wasn't playing on Sunday because of a hand injury. So it kind of was all Josh Hines-Allen on that defensive line, and Devon Hamilton also. And mind you, Ross Matisic, who's the long snapper, was out for the first half of the game with a back injury. And Devon Hamilton, who's a defensive lineman, the guy's huge. He filled in to be the long snapper, which I've never seen that before. I don't know where he learned how to be a long snapper because he, of course, doesn't have the physique, but he did a great job. So there's a lot of injuries that they had to battle with. With that being said, the defense, especially the defensive line and Josh Hines-Allen, did a great job. 5 quarterback hits, 3 sacks on rookie Cam Warren, and the Titans only managed 188 yards of total offense. So On the defensive line, you can see Josh Hunt had a big game. On offense, Jacoby Myers, they brought in Jacoby Myers at the trade deadline. He's a wide receiver from the Raiders, and he has been so good for the Jaguars, especially because, Brian Thomas Jr. wasn't out for a couple of games. You don't have Travis Hunter anymore. De'Ami Brown has kind of regressed. Parker Washington has really been the bright spot, but then he just went out with an injury yesterday. So there's really just Jacoby Myers who's been the bright spot in the receiving room. And look at the 84-yard 7-play drive after the Titans field goal. Jacoby Myers had a 50-yard catch and run, and then had the touchdown pass to take the 7-3 lead. So he's been a bright spot, and he's been doing really, really well. And you have to give it to Cam Little. In the beginning of the season, he was having his difficulties, but now he's just been able to nail everything that he's kicked. And he kicked a 45-yard field goal before halftime to go up 18-3, and that kind of put the game away for the Jaguars.
And that was because a foul sort of gave him enough space where he could make that kick, and that was a late hit on Trevor.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that was obviously that was the first little I don't want to say fight, but a little argument that they have. But you could say, I mean, someone threw a punch, but I guess you could say it was a fight.
It was kind of a chippy game, though, right? I mean, we're even seeing reports this morning that the Titans. The Titans, one of their players, is it Chestnut, who said that Logan Cook threatened him to threatened his life, I guess, on the field?
He did say that after the game. Of course, we haven't heard from the Jaguars yet. He said that after the Jaguars had their press conferences, and we haven't spoken to the Jaguars yet today. But of course, I assume when we have open locker room on Wednesday, someone's going to ask Logan Cook about that, because obviously that's not something to play around. Even if you have the emotions of the game, you shouldn't be doing that. But Trevor Lawrence did say after the game, he said, quote, "It's going to be physical. You're going to get their best shot." And I'm sure they know the same when they play us. That's what makes football fun. And these are two big rivals. I mean, they're bitter rivals. They have been the entire time they've been in existence. So, of course, you're going to get, like Trevor said, the best of the best. And emotions are going to be high. So I'm not really surprised that you had those little tips. But, at the end of the day, it's a football game. After that, you should have respect for each other as well.
Right. Well, it was nice to have a Victory Monday. We'll be watching to talk to you after the Colts at the Jags next week.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Alessandra Pomprian, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, guys.
All right. And that's our program. Thanks for listening. If you missed anything, you can find all of our past and current shows at firstcoastconnect.org. And while you're there, you can sign up for our brand new newsletter, which includes a breakdown of upcoming guests and topics delivered to your inbox every weekday. Join us tomorrow when we discuss why Jacksonville remains a city in search of its own story and why some city leaders want to change that. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
The North Florida TPO is committed to shaping our transportation future. We're focused on planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, connected community. Learn more at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com. Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Accidents can happen when you least expect it. For decades, our attorneys have dug out the facts to help juries decide who's at fault.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com.